Old phrases we still use today that have hilarious origin stories. During the Victorian times, a British Prime Minister named Robert Bob Cecil gave his nephew a powerful government job. People mocked the appointment by saying, "If Bob's your uncle, you're guaranteed success." Today, Brits say Bob's your uncle to mean something is quick or easy to do. In the early 1900s, when silent films became very popular, they would sometimes become boring for the audience watching. The crowd would chant, "Cut to the chase," encouraging the filmmakers to skip to the exciting chase scenes that were in almost every film at the time. In medieval England, a noblewoman named Lady Godiva decided to protest against her husband's cruel tax laws for the poor. She rode her horse naked through the streets of Coventry. Everyone agreed to look away out of respect, except for one man named Tom, who couldn't resist just one little peek. He became known as Peeping Tom. But unfortunately, he then got struck blind and hung as a punishment for peeping. During the slave trade, when slaves were being transported across the Atlantic, they were crammed onto ships with hardly no space to move, chained side by side and lying in filth and disease. To the sailors on board, it became known as packed like sardines. During the medieval times in England, when someone was accused of witchcraft, they were thrown into rivers with their hands and legs tied. If they floated, they were guilty, and if they sank and drowned, they were innocent. This bizarre, unfair way of judging led to the phrase, "Damned if you do, damned if you don't." In the Victorian times, people's fear of being buried alive was so intense due to rumors of it happening a lot that coffins were built with bells attached. If someone woke up underground, they could ring the bell and signal for rescue. A terrifying thought that led to the phrase, "saved by the bell." But there's more, because the workers who had to listen out for these bells at night were known to be working the graveyard shift. During the 1700s in the United Kingdom, a law was passed that allowed men to punish their wives with sticks no thicker than his thumb. This brutal idea was remembered, and eventually gave birth to the phrase, "rule of thumb." During World War II, a pilot's machine gun ran off an ammunition belt that was 9 yards long. So during battle, when a pilot had used all of his bullets, he had quite literally give the enemy the whole 9 yards, meaning he give it his all. Since World War II, the phrase has become popular to say to anybody who is putting 100% effort in what they were doing. In ancient times, it was common for newly married couples to receive bottles of honey mead as wedding gifts. The couple would consume this drink during the first month of marriage as it was seen to promote fertility and happiness. This tradition of drinking a honey-based wine over a monthly moon cycle led to the phrase honeymoon. During the 1700s, the British Navy had a punishment where a whip would be used. This whip was called the cat o' nine tails. So when a sailor was up to no good and was punished using this whip, it would often leave the sailor too stunned to speak. This is where the common phrase, "cat got your tongue," came from. It was considered to be an inside joke amongst the sailors towards somebody who got punished by the cat o' nine tails. During the early 1800s in the US, the lumberjack industry was booming. Lumberjacks worked hard, chopping at giant trees with their axes all day. The work was dangerous, and sometimes the heads of their heavy axes would fly off the handles during a powerful swing. This unexpected, dangerous event gave birth to the phrase, "fly off the handle," which today means losing your temper suddenly and uncontrollably. During the Victorian era, wealthy men would often go on hunting trips with their wealthy friends. They would take dogs with them to help catch the prey. Sometimes the hunting dogs would mistakenly chase the prey up the wrong tree. This is where the phrase, "barking up the wrong tree," originates from. Today it's said when someone is pursuing a mistaken idea. During the American Civil War, back in the 1860s, soldiers were ordered to build themselves shelters which housed up large amounts. These shelters were called shebangs. Over time, this term expanded to mean everything in one group. Today we say, "the whole shebang," meaning the whole set of something. During the Victorian era, it became a popular tradition among wealthy families to gift a silver spoon to a newborn at their christening as a good gesture. But since poorer families couldn't afford such luxurious gifts, the children of the rich were said to be born with a silver spoon in their mouth, marking them as privileged from the very start of life. In the 1860s, a U.S. Civil War general named General Burnside gained popularity, not just for his military tactics, but for his distinctive facial hair. He grew thick strips of hair running down his cheeks, which connected to his mustache, while keeping his chin clean-shaven. His unique style became a trend, and people began referring to this facial hairstyle as Burnsides. Over time, the words flipped, and it became known as we know it today, sideburns. Before World War I, it was common for warships to fly multiple flags during battle to confuse the enemy. However, warfare rules put a stop to this tactic, as it was seen as sneaky and dishonorable. All ships were ordered to fly only their true flags before firing in battle. This meant they were showing their true colors. Back in the early days of America, before dollars and coins were common, hunters and traders would often use the skin of a male deer, known as a buck, to trade for goods. A buckskin was a valuable item and became a standard way to barter for things like food or weapons. Over time, people started using the word buck to describe the value of a trade. And even after paper money was introduced, the habit stuck. That's why today we still call a dollar a buck. In the Middle Ages, in England, a lord's wife named Lady Godiva decided to ride her horse through the streets naked to protest against her husband, who had increased the tax for the poor people. The people of the town all agreed to look away as she rode through. Everybody did, apart from one man named Tom, who couldn't resist just one little peep. Tom was said to have been struck blind and executed after this. And all this is the reason we call somebody Peeping Tom, if they are being nosy. During the Victorian era, railroads became the new fast way of transport. Workers and passengers would often jump off the moving train instead of waiting for it to stop, to quickly get to their destination. Those who landed smoothly would quite literally hit the ground running. During the Victorian era, rich people became scared of mistakenly being buried alive at their funeral, due to rumors of it happening to others. So wealthy families would pay for tombs above ground for their bodies to lay once they have passed. But as their bodies decomposed, a vile stench was wafted across the graveyard. This is where the phrase "stinking rich" came from. In the early 1900s, before the invention of the television, football was broadcasted on the radio. So to make it easier for listeners, they would divide the pitch up into different sections so people could follow along. When the ball was back in the goalkeeper's box, you would hear the radio host say, "Back to square one." In the 1920s, carnivals became very popular attractions. People would often participate in games to win prizes at these events. If an adult wanted to play, they would aim for the top prize, which was a cigar. If they didn't get the top prize, they were said to have gotten close, but no cigar. In the 1860s, during the American Civil War, soldiers who got shot would often fall face first into the dirt. It was said that the dead soldier was quite literally biting the dust. During the Victorian era, in the United Kingdom, working-class people were highly taxed. So many people's goal was to try to avoid paying it as much as possible. There was a slang word for tax, which was scot. So anyone who successfully avoided paying tax were considered to have gotten away scot-free. Also, in the Victorian era, bakers were required by law to sell a full dozen loaves of bread, otherwise they would be punished for potentially ripping off customers. To make sure they never sold any bread short, the bakers would add an extra loaf to be on the safe side. And this is why today, a baker's dozen is 13 and not 12. In the early 1800s, rich people would often host dinner parties. If anybody at the party upset the host for any given reason, then the host would serve the unwanted guest a cold piece of meat, which was a polite way of telling them they are no longer welcome. This piece of meat was usually a shoulder, hence why we give the cold shoulder to somebody we would like to dismiss. In the 16th century, the popular nursery rhyme called "Hey Diddle Diddle" originated in England. In the rhyme, it features a cow jumping over the moon as an expression of achievement. So in times of joy, people would refer back to this rhyme by saying they were over the moon. In the Victorian era, poverty was very high in Great Britain. A lot of families couldn't even afford to eat food every day. So as a way to earn money, they'd collect urine in a pot and would sell it to leather tanners. As the urine was used to tan leather, the families that had to rely on this for money were considered to be piss poor. But then some families were even more poor, that they didn't have a pot to piss in. In medieval England, pubs would often get very rowdy, and fights would always break out. If a fight broke out, the bartender, which was usually the owner of the pub, would shout, "Mind your P's and Q's," meaning mind your pints and quarts. In today's terms, they were basically saying, "Move your drinks so they don't get spilled." In the 1800s, hat makers often worked with mercury when making the hats. After a while of being exposed to mercury, the hat makers would turn crazy as it caused mood swings, poisoning, and confusion, which all led to the expression, "mad as a hatter." In the late 1800s, boxing was a very popular sport, but much more brutal than today. Fighters were left to fight until the end, with no such thing as throwing the towel in. The only way was to be saved by the bell. In the 1800s, when the British Navy was at its peak, hundreds of ships would be sailing the seas at a time. The sailors on board these ships would often fall ill due to the lack of nutrition in the food and being crowded below deck. When sailors felt ill, they were told to go below deck to rest for a little while. This act of resting below deck out of the sun is where the phrase "under the weather" came from. In the early 1700s, when someone would challenge another person to a foot race, one of the people watching would make a line on the ground with their shoe as a starting line. This line that had been scratched on the ground to mark the beginning is where the common phrase, "to start from scratch," originated from. But there's more to this, because in the next century it became popular for a race to start with someone waving their hat down towards the ground to signal the start of the race. This act is where the other common phrase, "at the drop of a hat," comes from. In England, during the Victorian era, poor families would send their children to go around markets and food stands to steal food. These children were sometimes left to get away with it because they were considered to have naught, which back then meant they have nothing. Children who had naught were more likely to be seen as trouble causers. This is where the word naughty came from. In the 1860s, in England, football and rugby were two different versions of the same sport. The people who preferred the football version of the sport wanted to stand out, so they created the Football Association. This long word was then shortened to ASOC football, then again to soccer, then eventually to soccer. Hence why the Americans adopted the name soccer and not football. Back in the 1400s, in France, a bell would ring at night, reminding people to put out their fires before falling asleep. This act was seen as covering the fire. In Old French, the word for cover was curfer, and fire was feu. The combination of these two words is where we get the word curfew from. During the 1500s in England, being a hunter was a hard job, sometimes out working for days on end. These hunters would track animals through all kinds of terrain, including thick forests and open, thin fields. This is where the phrase "through thick and thin" comes from, meaning sticking with someone no matter what heads your way. In the late 1800s, many places in the US banned ice cream soda from being sold on Sundays, as it was seen as too fancy for the day of rest. To work around it, soda shops started selling just the ice cream with syrup on top instead of soda. People loved it so much that it quickly became a massive hit around the country. It was then decided to be named the Ice Cream Sundae, after the day it was created for. In the 1800s, in America, bandwagons were used by traveling circuses and carnivals to parade through the towns, drawing attention and excitement before the main event. Politicians would pay to ride these bandwagons as a way to promote themselves for upcoming elections. Over time, this act became known as jumping on the bandwagon. Today, it's used to describe someone who engages in a popular trend to gain public favor. During the 17th century, when pirates roamed the seas, life on board the ships was very dangerous and uncertain. All pirates, regardless of their ranks, shared the same risk of storms, battles, and shortages of supplies. This shared vulnerability and the need for pirates to work together led to the popular phrase, "in the same boat," which we use today as a way of describing situations where people share the same challenges. During the 1700s, when tea was first brought to Great Britain, it was considered a rare and expensive drink. Over time, it became widely available, with different flavors and varieties emerging. As the drink became more popular, people developed personal preferences. If you didn't like a certain tea, you would say, "Not my cup of tea." This phrase is widely used today in Britain, and it's not just used for tea, but for anything that isn't your taste or cup of tea. Also in the 1700s, when candles were the main source of light, some people would burn the candle from both ends to provide more light. While it was effective, it causes the candle to burn more quickly. Hence the reason we say someone is burning the candle at both ends when they're overworking themselves by staying up late and waking up early.